All right, so now that we've built this whole understanding of the way in which demanders behave and suppliers behave, and we understand the notion of market equilibrium, and we understand what happens if there's some sort of change in tastes and preferences or a cost of factors of production, now we got to back off a second and say like, all right, now we're getting into the thick of it. Yeah, now we're getting deeper and deeper and deeper into our understanding of economics. And what you're going to find in all of these diagrams throughout your whole course of study, in this course here in microeconomics, also in macroeconomics, is that you see a diagram and you think it's kind of flat and basic. And then all of a sudden there's like, ooh, there's another little story. Ooh, there's another little story. Ooh, there's another little concept. Because basically what economists have done is taken these human behaviors and they've piled them up on one another, right, and expressed them in a diagram. And it's actually really, really cool. And in this diagram, we're going to talk about two main concepts. The first one is fundamental to capitalism, fundamental to free markets, which is that the market itself creates perfect allocation of resources. Perfect allocation of resources means, in really like layman's terms, that the people who are able to, the exact amount of people who are able and willing to buy something, willing and able to buy something, are buying it. And the exact perfect amount of people who are willing and able to sell something are selling it. That's market equilibrium, right? So it's like this genius simplicity of the marketplace that in free markets happens. And it's like the perfect, most efficient allocation. Allocation is the way in which you distribute something. Allocation of resources. The perfect amount of resources are going into producing something, and the perfect amount of resources are going into buying something, okay? So that's like the culminating moment of this unit, which is understanding the perfect allocation of resources in the free markets. And then we're going to take it a step further, which I'm just going to warn you for now might be a little bit confusing, but I need to layer this idea in because when we get to the last unit of this course called market failure, we're going to come back to this concept about what it looks like to allocate resources perfectly. And we're actually going to take the same diagram, which is the basic microeconomic demand and supply diagram, that rule of 11 diagram that you now own it, it's yours, you understand it, you understand it's the beginning of all stories of microeconomics. We're going to take that diagram and we're going to relabel it a little bit. And you don't have to have a thorough understanding of that now. Don't stress out if you don't, but it's really nice to have that layer in your mind so that when we get to the last unit of this course on market failure, it'll be there, okay? Cool. So before we get into actually looking at the diagrams, let's take a look at some key terms that you need to know for allocative efficiency. Number one, you need to know what consumer surplus means. Consumer surplus is the extra satisfaction or utility gained by consumers by paying a price that is lower than what they are prepared to pay. When you see the diagram, that'll make more sense. Producer surplus is the excess of actual earnings that a producer makes from a given quantity of output over the amount the producer would be prepared to accept for that output. What that's saying basically is that it's a producer who gets more for his or her good than they would have been willing to accept. Hold on to that. A visual is easier to understand. Community surplus is when you take consumer surplus and producer surplus and add them together. So community surplus is the total excess utility for society. Consumer surplus plus producer surplus. Again, looking at the diagram will make it make more sense. And then lastly, you need to know this definition. Allocative efficiency is when a market is in equilibrium with no external influences and no external effects. It is said to be socially efficient or in a state of allocative efficiency. What? Yeah. A lot of econ terms that can make you feel intimidated, make you feel like, oh, I got to really study. Just chill, relax. Listen, you got this. You can understand this. And when you look at vocab words, it can be hard sometimes. But when you see the visual of it, you'll see that, okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at the diagram. So just overall, remember, we're talking about market efficiency. And what's this diagram? You know this diagram. This is the rule of 11, right? This is the basic microeconomic diagram that is used for every single diagram that you will use in all of microeconomics, okay? So I'm just giving you that picture, and what we're talking about here, and really I should have put a title in there, but I didn't put a title in there. But market efficiency, okay? Maybe that's the title. Market efficiency, okay? What do we have? Price, $, P1, 0, Q1, quantity, units per month, D1 and S1, okay? So just, that's where the story begins, always, okay? That's where the story begins, okay? Now, what I'm gonna make you see right now, though, is remember when I told you to think about this supply curve as like a series of data points, not like not aligned, but like a series of individuals who are making decisions based on their own minds? Okay, what does that mean? What this means is that if there's a person who, let's say this is $10. That person was willing to pay $20 for this product, but they didn't have to. Why? Because the market equilibrium is 10. This person was willing to pay 18. This person 16, 14, 13, 12, blah, 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 all the way down to 10. So basically, if the price is $10, what this line tells us is these people would have been willing and able to pay more than the equilibrium price, but they didn't have to. You see that? That's pretty cool. So if you were to take these lines, right, and take that and come down to $10, 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 blah, blah, blah. What you would end up with is an area of a triangle that represents the extra happiness that people got because they didn't have to pay the price they were willing to pay, $20, because the market equilibrium price was actually less than that, which was 10. So think about my ring. I was willing to pay 20. I only paid 15. So that extra $5 is extra happiness. That's when people say like, oh, and now I can go out to dinner for free, which of course isn't true because you didn't really spend the $20, right? You spent 15, but that extra $5 I would have paid but didn't have to, that's my consumer surplus happiness, consumer surplus utility. Hold that thought. You got that? Okay, now back to the diagram. Well, what about the other side of the story, the producers? Well, take a look at the line. Remember I told you this isn't actually a line, it's a series of data points. What do these represent? These represent real people, real producers, who would have accepted a lower price, maybe $5 for the ring, but they got 10. They got 10. Would have taken 6, 7, 8, 9, but they got 10. So this triangle right here is representation. This person would have taken 5, but they got 10. So that person got less. This is all an example of each one of those individual people's extra what? Utility as a result of being willing and able to sell the good for a lower price, right? But they got a higher price. And that's what we call producer surplus. Hey, and then if we have a community of producers and a community of consumers and we add them together, oh my goodness, we have extra surplus for whom? Producers? No. Consumers? No. The entire community. It's so cute. Right? It's so fun. So community surplus would be the sum of these two things, which means that that very squiggly triangle right there is representative of the total happiness that's extra as a result of both consumers and producers paying a price that was less than what they would have expected, or more, right? Was more beneficial to them than what they would have accepted. Okay? So let me clean that up a bit. Take a look at the next slide, and there you have it. Okay? Check it out. This is pretty cool. There's consumer surplus, there's producer surplus, and you add those together, community surplus plus consumer surplus. Sorry, community surplus equals consumer surplus plus producer surplus, and good night. You thought it was just a flat, boring diagram that just changed price. No, there are so many stories here, and it makes so much sense. It's like layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of human behavior piled into this one diagram, and it just keeps giving you more and more information, and it just was what I think anyway, just like blows people's mind when they really get into economics. So many people think economics is just like data and stuff. It's such not that. It is you and me and how I would feel if I were willing to pay $20 for a ring and I only had to pay 15. Just like if you were the supplier and you would have taken 5, but you got 15, man, you would have been jacked. You got 10 free dollars, quote unquote, right? So that's human stories. It's not data. It's not triangles. No, it's human lives, man. People are excited because they got more profit for their good than what they would have accepted. It's amazing, okay? So this diagram right here is the market efficiency diagram, okay? And this is really cool because you see, what I want you to kind of understand about this is that right here, this allocation of resources and that point right there, and it should be something more exciting than yellow. I love yellow though. Yellow's a good color. But make it green right there. Make it stronger. Hold on. Make it green right there, okay? That point right there is something called a socially efficient point of output, okay? And what that means is that for society as a whole, this combination, price quantity combination, is the best combination for everybody in society, okay? And as a result of that, the free market's considered to be supreme because that handshake was an establishment of what would be best in the marketplace for everyone. I got happy, the producer was happy, blah, 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 okay? So this right here is kind of the end of this unit on demand, supply, and market equilibrium. However, I'm going to layer in one more thing for you so that you can have this in your head when we get to the last unit of microeconomics, which is market failure. And if this doesn't make sense to you right now, that's cool. I'm going to go over it again when we get to market failure. But I want to do it now because it's kind of fresh in your mind, okay? So take a look at this diagram, right? And what I want you to focus on really is the label here for the supply curve and the label here for the demand curve, okay? And because on the next slide, these labels are going to change, and I'm going to explain why when we get there. But first, I want to give you the definitions of what these terms are, okay? So I'm introducing two different new concepts to you: marginal cost and marginal social benefit. So the marginal cost curve and the marginal social benefit curve. By the way, in economics, whenever you see the word cost, let me tell you something. They're talking about producers, okay? Producers cost, price, consumers, price, cost, producers, okay? So the marginal social cost curve, okay, is another name for the supply curve, right? It's like you call me Brad or you call me Cartwright, I'm still me, okay? So we could call it the supply curve, which is what we've been doing, but we could also call it the marginal social cost curve. And the reason for that is that the supply curve for a market is largely determined by the industry's cost of production. We assume that the cost of the industry, the private costs, are equal to the cost of society when the supply curve represents the social cost curve. I'll explain this. In efficiency analysis, we refer to the supply curve as the marginal social cost, or MSC curve, which represents this concept. Hold that in your head. Don't worry about don't get stressed. Wait till the next slide, it'll make more sense. Then there's the marginal social benefit curve, or the MSB curve, which is what we've been referring to as the demand curve, okay? The demand curve is determined by the utility or benefits that consumption of a good or service brings to the consumers. We assume that the private benefits of the consumers are equal to the public benefits of the consumer, of society. Therefore, the demand curve represents the social benefits to society. Just go with me. In efficiency analysis, we refer to the demand curve as the marginal social benefit curve, or the MSB. Okay. So basically, the supply curve, which I always represent with red, right? The supply curve is going to get a new name. Okay. The demand curve, which I always associate with green, is going to get a new name. The new name for the supply curve, the marginal social cost curve. Why? Because costs are incurred by suppliers, the cost of the factors of production. The new demand curve is going to be the social benefit curve because consumers benefit by buying something. Okay? All right? Cool. Check out the next slide. This slide looks really confusing. However, it's actually built on the same exact principles of the microeconomic rule of 11 demand and supply curve, okay? And you will see I put it up here. This was the market efficiency diagram that I had 2 slides ago, right? There's supply, there's demand, there's consumer surplus, there's producer surplus, add them together, community surplus. I know that's small, but I wanted it to be small. But I just want you to see, like, boom, we could actually take that whole curve, right? It's the same diagram, put up here, but we changed 2 things, okay? The first thing we changed is we changed the name of the demand curve to the marginal social benefit curve, okay? And we changed the name of the supply curve to the marginal social cost curve. Everything else stays in place, okay? And the reason for that, if you think about this line, the demand curve, as the increased benefit that society, these are people, remember? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 100 million. Right? If you added all this up and all these people were able to buy what they wanted to, this would be the social benefit, the benefit to society marginally, which just means if you add one more, right? So if we start here at 0, add another, and add all that up, this is going to be a summary of, or an addition problem of the marginal social benefit. Why is it benefit? Because they're happy, utility, they're happy that they bought the product, okay? Okay, then flip around. What are you going to need to do? Okay, now we're going to take a look at the marginal social cost curve and what that means. Okay, so flip the idea around and remember that this curve also is a series of people, human beings, right? And each one of them, each one of these dots represent the minimum cost for them to produce whatever good this is, okay? So that means that if this is the minimum cost for the first producer, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 100 millionth, then if we add all this up, this line becomes representative of the total cost to society marginally, meaning 1, 2, as we add them together. As we add one more unit, one more supplier, we end up with a line that represents the cost to society or to all suppliers of producing it. You get that? That's pretty straightforward, man. Like, it's not that complicated, but the language around it's so hard. And so much of economics is just about the language, okay? So if you understand that, then you realize that this point right here, this point right there, the P1, Q1 point, the handshake, the market equilibrium, yeah, is for society the point of absolute perfection in the efficiency of allocating resources. Did you hear that? This yellow dot represents perfection in the efficiency of allocating resources, meaning that the resources can't be allocated more better, more perfectly, more simply, more naturally, more invisibly, more greatly. It's just perfection, and the free markets produce that by default because people are just looking out for their own self-interest, okay? So this allocative efficiency graph is really important, not now for your studies of demand, supply, and market equilibrium, but really important for your understanding of market failure later, because market failure means that the purchase of a product is going to mess with that perfect point of allocative efficiency. Market failure is going to mess up the beauty, this point right here, the point of allocative efficiency, also called the socially optimal point of efficiency. Market failure is going to mess with that point. And if you understand this now, just let it sit in your brain for a little while until you get the market failure. Boom, your understanding is going to deepen significantly.